This is Andy.
Excitement's building.
This is Thursday.
I'm nervous. Breathe with me, guys.
And this is Andy on Thursday. That's right, we gave Andy his own show.
No way. No way.
Yes way, Andy.
Holy sheet.
Holy sheet indeed. Andy Given Thursday. Live every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern, only on the Comic Core.
Holy sheet indeed. It is Andy Given Thursdays. The week's starting to wind down. Hey, warning to everybody, we might drop a couple spicy words, but hey, they're just words, right? We'll move on from that. Good to see everybody. Let's get excited. Let's get excited. If you're not excited about Star Wars right now, you're wrong, or you're not a Star Wars fan. So, hey, welcome to Andy Given Thursdays. Everybody grab something cold to drink. Let's hang out. Let's talk Star Wars. And let's talk some Star Wars news, some Star Wars speculation. Let's talk some Star Wars comic books. And I'll hit up this chat really quick. We had Ruben Guzman, Cowabunga fan, man. Ruben was in here, the first one in here, appreciate it. But what most of you don't know, Ruben was in here making that same statement 12 hours ago when the show first got set up. So Ruben, man, thanks for your support. Thanks for hanging out, dude. Ricky Markstadt, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Hopefully you guys enjoy the content. If not, let me know. We'll figure something out. Colossal Customs, hey, new name to the chat. Appreciate it. Consider liking, commenting, subscribing, and hanging out. Looking forward to seeing you some more. Chris Barrett, man, you weren't first, so you must be last. Good to see you, though. Appreciate you being here. Come on, Mama. Hey, what's up? Great to see you. Appreciate your support and hanging out with us. And somehow that bot is still running, even though chat hasn't logged in yet. Sam, I am, man. Hey, thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. And, oh, my mom. Hey, good to see you. I love having my mom here in the shows and hanging out with us. I appreciate it. Bored Anoid's in the house. StreamYard is still catching up on the chat. There's my mom. Hey, Jackson, great to see you, man. Let's talk Star Wars. Colossal just changed his name. Hey, Justin Rican Comics. Hey, great to see you, man. So let's get into these guests tonight. This is probably going to be one of the, in my opinion, most important shows I've ever done on a Thursday. We've got some great guests. We're talking Star Wars. We're talking some speculation, some news, like I said. Star Wars universe is about to explode, in my opinion, over the next number of years and just bring us some of the best content ever. So my first guest tonight that I'm really excited to hang out with and talk to, like I said, a lot of Star Wars content. There's a lot of people with a lot of takes online with a lot of information and news. We know that Mando Season 2 trailer dropped and lots of reactions, lots of speculation, not lots of news. So when I was diving through all this stuff, I found a new podcast that I'm really digging. And I got to meet this gentleman earlier today and talk to him over this past week. And that's Matt with the Salty Nerd podcast. Dude, Matt, great to have you. I really enjoyed your take on some Mando stuff. And if you could, please share with us about the Salty Nerd podcast, share with everybody what's going on with there, and tell us a little bit about that Mando review that you did, some of the news and speculation that popped up.
Sure thing. So I'm a professional novelist. I write books for a living. I'm the author of the Earthman Jack series. I have a background in Hollywood where I was a writer and filmmaker and producer for some time, about 10 years, I'd say. I made a movie with Jeremy Renner that some of you might know him as Hawkeye from the Avengers. So that was like my big claim to fame. I was at the Cannes Film Festival in 2004 or 2005 timeframe. And so I've got a little bit of background in the entertainment industry. And I live out here in Las Vegas now, which is where I, write my books. And while I was out here, I just kind of met some local nerds at through Twitter, and we started hanging out, and we would meet at a coffee shop every Monday morning, and we would just kind of, shoot the crap. Like we'd just sit there and start talking about Star Wars, Star Trek, what movies we've watched, what, TV shows we watched, and kind of debate, about certain things. And we were like, what would happen if we recorded this and put it out there for other people to listen to? And so we started doing the Salty Nerd podcast, which is basically just us getting together and kind of talking about movies from our own unique perspectives. I'm kind of like the film geek because I went to film school and I worked in the business, so I can kind of bring that expertise to the table when we're talking about movies. Then we have our host, Alex, who's the Salty Nerd, and he kind of has a unique perspective. And then we have our color commentator, Matt Vader, who just kind of comes in with jokes and bitterness and stuff like that. And my fiance Jude is the girl's perspective, so she'll chime in with, you know, some female insight into some of these things. And it's just the four of us. Every week we get together and we do a show, and we have like a specific kind of theme or topic that we talk about, like Viking movies, for instance. We'll sit down, we'll watch 3 Viking movies, and we'll go through each one of them and kind of crack jokes and entertain people, you know, while educating them about movies and TV shows and stuff. And so part of doing the podcast is a YouTube channel. You can find us at saltynerdvideo.com. And I've just recently started doing kind of like news videos. So it's not just our podcast being reposted on the channel. It's actually us kind of commenting on kind of current topics and current news. And I did a video not too long ago about the big Mandalorian rumor, which was that Pedro Pascal walked off in the middle of the season and he quit the show and all this other stuff. And I basically laid out my case as to why I think that rumor is complete butkus, which is a technical term. It means not true. I guess that's where you found me. So now I'm here.
That was awesome, man, because we'll dive into that a little bit more here in a moment. Before we bridge that gap and get to that Mandalorian 2 trailer, let's introduce these next 2 guests. And I'm really excited to have Tony on tonight. My friend Tony, BlueGreen Artifacts, has been a member of the Simpleman's Comics Patreon group for quite a long while, and we love talking about comic books in that group. And one of the things that we talk about a fair bit, the Star Wars books. Over the last, Tony, man, it's good to have you. Over the last, it's been longer than a year, and I can't really put my finger on how long it's been, but we've been talking, me, you, and Adam, and a number of other people, Brian and Jack and Simpleman's Comics, we've been talking about some of those Star Wars books that we just couldn't figure out why they weren't moving and why they weren't garnering the attention that they really should. And tonight's discussion about Star Wars is going to add some fuel to that fire a little bit, which Disney Plus and Lucasfilms and everything, like I said, that universe is just going to expand exponentially, and we're going to see some of those books really get the attention they deserved. And instead of us sitting there wondering, we're going to watch it unfold in front of us. So, Tony, man, it's great to see you. It's great to have you on tonight. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. Thank you for the invite, Andy. Matt, this is the first time we've met, but pleasure to meet you. Sometime I'd love to hear stories of some of those insider Hollywood anecdotes that I'm sure you might have. But yeah, it's been going on 2 years, I think, in that Discord. And to be honest, I love that. I mean, I have a regular job. I have a regular family who doesn't care anything about comics. But, you know, my mind's working. And if I'm stopping for gas and thinking about the first appearance of something, jump on Discord and I got somebody to chat with about it really quick. So it's a lot of fun. I think we have been talking about some of these books. I only wish we had been buying all of these books that we were talking about. But yeah, I kind of come at it from the seller side of things. My hobby the last 5 years has been turning my love of comics into a little, I wouldn't say profitable, but a business big enough to build my own collection. So I'm pretty active on eBay and Amazon, about 1,000 listings plus on both. But I love comics and I love talking about them. So I appreciate the invite and look forward to chatting.
Yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm really looking forward to kind of bridging the communities a little bit here between some pop culture and some comic books and some other stuff. And because when it comes to books that are kind of moving and books that people are asking a lot of questions on, man, you're kind of the central hub that I look to a lot of times. I greatly appreciate your time, man. It's going to be a blast. Our last guest tonight, who's a Star Wars fan as well, who should be no stranger to the comic horror, and that's Carson, CW Woodard, 19. Hey, man.
Hey, what's going on? I'm so happy to be in the guest seat, not the host seat. I'm ready for some fun tonight, Andy. Thanks for the invite.
Dude, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'll hit up the chat again really quick. Chris Barrett's hanging out still. Ricky Markstadt's still hanging out. Zuni, new arrival. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Please enjoy the content. If not, hit me up. Tell me what we're doing wrong, or tell me what I'm doing wrong. Actually, not what those guys are. Sorry. The wife's here hanging out. Another big Star Wars fan. Appreciate it. She's the one that's actually let me build a theater in the basement for some Star Wars stuff. So that guy DZ, new name in the chat. Hey, I appreciate it. If you like, please consider liking, commenting, subscribing. We're going to talk Star Wars tonight. Welcome to the Comic Core channel, and hang out. Look at all the content that's going on every night of the week. Yep, there's Ricky. Ahsoka leaving Jedi Order is way sadder than Kylo Ren dying. Ooh.
There's a lot of things sadder than Kylo Ren dying, though. I wasn't sad at all when that happened.
So yeah, like I said,
week that's sad too.
Tonight's topic really wasn't scripted. It was more of a let's talk about Star Wars and Star Wars speculation and just discuss some of the stuff. So really the fuel that's hitting the fire right now is the Mandalorian Season 2 trailer. That's how I found Matt in the Salty Nerd podcast. And I was infuriated with the number of videos and content being put out on social media that's talking about Pedro Pascal walking away from Mandalorian Season 2. So I don't agree with that. I don't think that's real. And I'm very curious, before we talk to Matt a little bit more about this, Tony and Carson, have you guys seen the Mandalorian 2 Season 2 trailer yet?
Yes.
And have you guys heard about this whole ordeal about Pedro Pascal possibly walking away?
Yeah, I read a little, the little rumor story about it. There's just so many of those out there. I think nowadays you really have to take everything with a grain of salt, and it's like fact checking political statements. You got to look at who's saying it and who else is saying it, and wait a day and see if there's any more, or if it's just that one thing. But I know for a fact Matt has more insight into this than I do. But yes, I did hear that. But if it is untrue, I'm very happy to hear that it's untrue.
Carson, man, I know you're a massive Turtles fan. We're doing those Turtles reads every Tuesday night on your channel.
That's right.
Epic. But where do you sit with this?
I mean, I'm not too worried about this. I was talking to some of the other Comic Core members the other day about it, and well, number one, I can't picture Pedro Pascal walking away from that type of money, that type of contract, where it's probably just going to keep getting renewed. There's just so much. I mean, this is literally his career on the line. If he were to walk away from something like that, that would just almost be career suicide at that point. I don't think he's that stupid. Rather, he hates someone on the set, doesn't agree with the scripts, which the scripts, at least in the first season, were great. I can't picture any of this being true. If it was, probably just end up putting another guy into the Mandalorian suit, do a voiceover, and we could at least get the rest of Season 2 done and figure out Season 3 next.
Well, here's where I sit with this, is I feel like I double checked with my wife. And I'm like, didn't we have this conversation last year for a solid week and a half, almost 2 weeks, where I could have sworn we heard a rumor at the tail end of Season 1 where there was a conversation being brought up, people speculating on him wanting more face time, wanting to be out of the armor, wanting more money, you name it. There was speculation rampant. I feel like there was speculation rampant at the end of Season 1. And when I brought this up with my wife the other day, she's like, you know what? I think you're right. I feel like we had this conversation at the tail end of Season 1, and it almost feels like some of these rumors are just being regurgitated, respun, and added to fuel the fire right now. Now, so when I was going through all this stuff and I found Matt and I found the Salty Nerd podcast, it was a breath of fresh air to see a real take with what I felt was a lot more solid factual theories, if that's a terrible way of putting it. But I mean, you know what I'm getting at, Matt. You had a real hot take that I felt great about, that I was like, this is real news. This is real information when it comes to this, because Carson, I agree with you for the most part. I don't think it'd be career suicide for him to walk away from it, but in the same aspect, it's a contract. Who wouldn't want to be known as the Mandalorian for the next 10, 20, 30 years, whether you're in the suit or not in the suit, or you're doing the ADR, I think it's called ADR, the voice stuff. And to be honest, in the first season, yeah, how much was he really there and in the suit anyway? So Matt, let's roll right into your take on this. And you know, you don't have to spend an entire time talking about what you've already talked about, but for the people viewing and listening right now, man, please share your thoughts and your take on this, because I think it aligns with a lot of people that have been paying attention to what's happening and not letting social media really dictate how they feel.
So before I get into this, I think it's kind of important to set the context for where this rumor came from and what my role is in the Star Wars community. Around the time after The Last Jedi came out, I was very traumatized by that movie. Not just because I'm a Star Wars fan and I didn't like what they did with the material, but also because I'm a filmmaker and a writer. And I was just so shocked at how bad that script was, and it actually got made. So I turned to Twitter to kind of find solace. And I became a part of this community. It's known as the Fandom Menace. And it's basically just a collection of very hardcore Star Wars fans, people who love Star Wars with all their heart, who don't agree with the direction that the current regime at Lucasfilm is taking the franchise. And, you know, like sometimes it's political, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of taste. But for the most part, everyone's united in their love of Star Wars and in their hatred of the people who are currently making it. So they're kind of predisposed to believing the dumbest rumors that come out in favor of being anti-Star Wars, anti-Lucasfilm, stuff like that. And because of my experience as a filmmaker, my 10 years in Hollywood in the industry, I was able to bring a kind of perspective to a lot of the discussion around some of these rumors that didn't always make me popular, but I've always been proven right. So one of the big things was when Kathleen Kennedy was rumored to be fired when her contract was going to be up. I think this was like 2 years ago, something along those lines. And everyone was convinced that Kathleen Kennedy was going to be fired. And I was like, she's not going to be fired. She's probably going to be in there until she's like 80 or 90 or something like that. And I explained why I believe that, because of how I know Hollywood executive contracts work. And what happened is that people started spreading rumors because they knew that her contract renews every 2 years. So they just assumed that her contract wasn't going to renew that year. And I was like, look, she hasn't done anything to warrant getting fired from Disney. And this is why. And I was even on a live stream with Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, where he had a bunch of people on to talk about this topic. And I was the only one there saying, like, look, she's not going to be fired. You know, she's going to stick around, and, you know, Disney has insulated her. There's no way she's ever going to be fired. The only way she's going to leave is if she chooses to retire, and then she's going to appoint her own replacement. And everyone said, oh, Kadish, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. I have inside sources that tell me Kathleen Kennedy is going to be fired. And one of the people who were really pushing this was a YouTuber named Grace Randolph. And some of you might be familiar with Grace Randolph. She has a YouTube channel called Beyond the Trailer. I think that's what it's called. And, you know, she does a lot of like kind of reviews and some movie news. I really liked her reviews, so I was following her channel. But she did a video around this time where she had an inside source tell her about a phone call that happened between Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Iger, and the heads of Marvel and Pixar. So it's kind of like one of those things where the CEO of Disney just got all of his top people together on a conference call to have like some type of meeting. And the way that Grace framed this was really interesting. So basically, she told you what her source said, which was that there was this conference call that actually did happen. And Kathleen Kennedy was at Pinewood Studios in the UK when it occurred. And then she started talking about her theory as to what happened, which was KK got chewed out Bob Iger was not happy with her. Bob Iger was going to fire her, all this stuff. But she expressed her theory in such a way where it sounded like she was saying it came from the source that told her about this conference call. And when I saw this video, I was like, this is really strange, because she's basically throwing out something that she just made up, and she's making it sound like it came from an inside source. And so I called her out on it on Twitter. Like I tweeted at her. I was like, Grace, this is what you did. It's dishonest. You shouldn't do this. And rather than respond to me, she blocked me. And then a couple of weeks after that, Variety announces Kathleen Kennedy's contract renewed. And I was the only one who's called that as happening. And so that won me a bunch of credibility within the fandom menace. And so I've continued to kind of bring my... Now, I'm not always right, but when it comes to Star Wars, my track record has been pretty good. And that's simply because people are like Star Wars and Star Trek, people are just kind of predisposed to believe the worst of those series.
Yeah.
And so when I kind of put a damper on that, people get pissed at me, but I'm always usually proven right. So I'm batting pretty well on this. So here's what happened with the Mandalorian stuff. Okay, so sorry if I'm a little long-winded. I kind of like to make sure everyone's on the same page when I start explaining this stuff, because it can get a little wonky, a little in the weeds. So Grace Randolph comes back a couple weeks ago, and she says, I have an inside source. Now, one of the rules of thumb that everyone out there listening should always abide by is that if there's an inside source that's afraid to be named, it's fake. Okay? Like typically, if somebody is actually scared to share information, they're not going to share that information. Okay, they're going to keep it close to the vest. They're not going to risk their livelihood. If someone's willing to just make stuff up and put it out there, they can make up anything. Some of these sources I don't even believe really exist. I think it's just the YouTuber saying they have a source and using that as cover for their own cockamamie theories. But anyway, so I've said Grace Randolph has this long history of basically making stuff up or getting bad information from a source. And this is something where like they've had people from the actual productions of the stuff that she's reported on come out and say, this never happened. I was here. You're completely lying. And she's just like, well, says you, basically, like that's what it boils down to. And she'll point to a few of her stories that she got right, but the stuff that she usually gets right in terms of like scooping entertainment news is stuff that if you read the trade publications like Variety, Hollywood Reporter, stuff like that, you can make an educated guess that this stuff's going to happen.
Right.
So like I could start a YouTube channel where I start making wild theories, and I could be right like half the time or a quarter of the time. And every time I'm wrong, I'd just be like, well, I was right this time. And that's what she does. She just points to all the times that she happened to be right, even though the number of times she's wrong far outweighs them. So I've already been like, I still like her reviews of stuff, but I don't put any stock into Grace's, scoops, I guess you'd say. So she came out in a video and basically dropped a insider information thing, which in my opinion is just her making stuff up again. And she basically said that Pedro Pascal walked out halfway through the production of season 2 of The Mandalorian. He wanted more FaceTime. He didn't want to have to wear the helmet. He was unhappy wearing the suit. And he was having conflict with the production end of things. So he went over Favreau and Filoni's head right to Lucasfilm. And when Favreau and Filoni heard about that, they fired him, and he walked off the set. And this was Grace's, scoop. And then after she put it out there, for some reason people listened to her. I don't know why, but it got picked up by a bunch of clickbait websites. And these are websites that their bread and butter is getting traffic to their stories so they can get ad clicks and make money. So they're always looking for the stuff that's going to get like rage clicks or controversy or something like that. And so a stupid theory like this is just tailor-made for them. So Grace's video gets shared around on all these sites. And then once the clickbait sites start picking it up, other more reputable sites are like, oh, there might be something to this story. So they pick that up, and that's how this stuff gets disseminated. And then because you're seeing it everywhere, the Twitterverse is like, oh, there must be something to this. So they start sharing around the articles and all that stuff. And that's how this rumor gets perpetuated. And I'm in a couple of private message groups on Twitter with Fandom Menace people, and they were all over this. I kept saying that I was like, guys, this is baloney. This is not just stupid rumors. This is easily disprovable rumors that anyone with even a modicum of knowledge of how Hollywood works would tell you it's stupid, it's baloney, it's fiction. It would never happen. So long story short, here's how this goes, okay? So first of all, when Pedro Pascal and his people would be negotiating for him to star in this series, right up front, the way those negotiations work is that Lucasfilm is going to lock him in to multiple seasons, right? Now, that could be 2 seasons, could be 3 seasons, could be 4 seasons. Typically, they'd have an idea. It's usually like a 3-season thing, and then like you're up for like a renegotiation type deal. So like if the show's a hit, after 3 seasons, they can come back, they can renegotiate for more money, more screen time, like what have you. Works like that on every TV show, all right? So, but in addition to that, they would probably be letting him know before he signs on. It's like, look, we have this plan where the main character doesn't take his helmet off, so we don't see his face. We might show your face 1 time per season. And so like going into the show, he would know that. And the idea that he would suddenly want more face time, knowing that he agreed to this beforehand, already is something dumb, okay? So another thing is that this is actually a very sweet deal for an actor, okay? Yeah. A show where you never get to see his face. Because what happened in season 1 is he came in, he shot a couple episodes, but then he went and he did a theater production. And while he was doing that theater production, his stand-in would come in, his body double, he'd wear the full helmet and stuff like that. So that wasn't really Pedro. Pedro Pascal would just come in and do ADR. He'd do the voice recording after everything was shot. And he was able to do that while he was doing other projects, because Pedro Pascal is not really a TV actor. He's a film actor who does these streaming shows occasionally. He did Narcos on Netflix, and those are basically just big movies, kind of broken up into episodes. So he's getting paid a leading man's salary with only having to do a fraction of the work that most leading men have to do. He doesn't have to be on set every day. He can go off, he can do movies. He can go off, he can do theater, he can do other TV shows. And he just has to show up enough to record his dialogue. And if they require his face, he has to be on set. So he's getting paid leading man money for doing, walk-on work, which is a great deal for any actor. I don't care how big you are. Like Brad Pitt would take that deal, right? So the idea that, he wants more screen time didn't really compute to me, because I think that he's signed up to do another like theater show or something like that. And if anything, and keep in mind, shooting on The Mandalorian finished before the COVID lockdowns happened back in February. So by the time the lockdown started in March, the shooting for Mandalorian was already done, okay? And we didn't hear anything about him walking away, right? Now keep this in mind. When Lord and Miller were fired off of Solo, how long between the time Kathleen Kennedy showed up on set and gave them their marching orders and the trades reported that had passed? Within an hour, right? Yeah. Like it happened, everyone on set got in their phones like, you'll never guess what happened. And then it was all over the place that Lord and Miller got fired. Okay, it traveled faster than the speed of sound, right? So the idea that Disney's flagship Star Wars show loses its main actor midway through filming and it goes completely unnoticed is beyond the realm of believability to me. Because that would have been all over Variety, it would have been all over Hollywood Reporter, Deadline. Some trade would have gotten a hold of that and reported it. Now also keep this in mind, okay? Pedro was probably locked in to at least 2 to 3 seasons of the show, possibly 5, if Favreau kind of has this idea in his head that he's going to do 5 seasons. So like they at least want to lock in their lead characters for that long, right? So if he has a contract there are certain stipulations in that contract that will prevent him from walking away, because losing your main leading actor partway through filming or between seasons or whatever can be really devastating to a production. So you put in safeguards to make sure that that doesn't happen. We're talking like massive fines, penalties, things like that, damaging his relationship with Disney. Like Disney could, like Bob Chapman, I think, is the current CEO. He could go to Pedro and be like, Pedro, if you ever want to work on another Disney picture again, you do not walk off this set. Now, keep in mind, Disney covers like what, 40% of all theatrical releases right now. So that would be career suicide, right? So why would you want to do that? It's kind of like that show Entourage, where, you know, he's playing Aquaman. He pisses off the head of Warner Brothers because he doesn't want to do the sequel. And then like his career suffers because of it. That's very realistic, right? So also, as an actor, if you have a problem when you're shooting a show, you don't go over the head of the people who run the day-to-day and go to the people at Lucasfilm, right? You would go to Dave Filoni, you'd go to Jon Favreau, you'd go to whoever's running the set, and you'd be like, hey, I have a problem, and then you'd work it out. The idea that you would go over the head to the studio people, it very rarely happens. That's a massive power play. That's something that Kevin Feige did when he was angling to get control of Marvel Studios away from Ike Perlmutter. He went right to Alan Horn and Bob Iger, and he said, look, either you give me control of Marvel or I'm walking. And so that's when they broke Marvel Studios away from the Marvel publishing and gave Kevin Feige control of it. Now, as an actor, Pedro Pascal, like he can't make those types of power plays because actors are replaceable. They're like cattle, right? They don't have any real power on set. So, but also like, you know, Jon Favreau, he's an experienced filmmaker. He's worked with actors before. A lot of actors love working with Jon Favreau. And the idea that he wouldn't be taking Pedro's grievances seriously is another kind of thing that stretches credibility with me. So there are all these realistic, logistical, Hollywood, inside baseball things that, in my mind, were not addressed by the rumor. Because it's not like, a lot of people don't really understand how Hollywood works, or like how the business end of actual TV and film production operates. There are a lot of safeguards in place to make sure that a lot of these rumors, what they claim, can't actually happen. And it's very rare when things get so bad that people get fired. Like the Lord and Miller thing, for instance, that was a shocker. That was something that caught everyone by surprise, because they had already shot almost the entire movie, right? And then they come in, they fire him, and they're like, oh, okay, we're just gonna redo the whole film. That was a big quagmire, and that was something that a lot of people point to as like, oh, I believe this could happen because that happened. But you know, that's just a measure of Kathleen Kennedy's incompetence as a production producer, as a creative producer. When it comes down to being a line producer, you know, someone who deals with logistics and stuff like that, Kathleen Kennedy is actually very skilled. But when it comes to the creative end, she's not quite where she needs to be running a studio like Lucasfilm. But getting back to The Mandalorian, the person who runs that show is Jon Favreau. Now, Dave Filoni is involved. Jon Favreau is really the guy behind it, and he's a very experienced filmmaker. He's someone who's handled multi-million-dollar productions before. He's spearheading the virtual sound stages that they're shooting on, that technology and stuff like that. He's a guy who's with it, who's together, who knows how to, make this stuff. He's produced a lot of TV shows over the years, some of them successful, some of them not, but they're all stuff that required someone who knew what they were doing to actually go out and do it. And so this rumor, like if you believe that Jon Favreau is a complete novice and hopeless at his job, okay, maybe I could see this happening. If you believe that Pedro Pascal, who by all reports that I've read, is a very professional actor who takes his job seriously, and he's a giving actor to his co-stars and stuff like that. If you believe that he's enough of a prima donna to do this type of thing, okay, maybe you'd believe this rumor. But there are just too many factors that go against the idea that this would actually happen that just stretch credibility with me. But the biggest thing is, like, if there was a reputable news source that went out there and reported on this and said that, yes, this is what happened, then I'd give it credibility. Like if Variety came out and said it, or, Deadline or something like that, but it's Grace Randolph saying this. Okay, keep in mind, everywhere else that you've heard this rumor, it all originated from Grace Randolph, who is proven to be a liar. Okay, so the idea that this rumor is true is like 1,000,000,000 to 1, in my opinion. And you know what I even did? I even called up Pedro Pascal's people. All right, I got his management company on the phone, and I said, "Hey, do you care to comment on this rumor?" And they're like, "Well, you got to go and call his PR people." I was like, "Great, what's their number?" So I called his PR people, and they were like, "Let me."
Oh, don't leave us hanging, man. Come on, internets. Come on, internets. You can do it.
Get back to you. Can you hear me?
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
You froze for a second there, Matt. If you could rewind for about 10 seconds.
Yeah. So I called up Pedro Pascal's management company. I said, "Hey, are there any truth to these rumors? Do you care to make a comment?" And they were like, "Well, his PR people usually handle this." I was like, "What's their number?" So they give me his PR people's number. So I call up his PR company. I say, "Hey, there's this rumor going around the internet. Pedro Pascal walked off halfway through season 2. Would you care to comment?" And they're like, "Let me get back to you." They never got back to me. I'm going to follow up with them. But here's a radical notion for people like Grace Randolph and the clickbait sites and stuff. Pick up the phone, call the actual people in the story, and see if you can verify it. So I haven't been able to verify one way or the other yet. I thought it was kind of suspicious that they kept sending me to like the PR people, and then the PR people didn't get back to me. But I'm nobody, so like it's not too out of the realm of possibility. But just the fact that I was willing to call and try to follow up on this should tell you that there's a very small measure of what it takes to be a professional when it comes to reporting stuff, and it's not a high bar to clear. You go to the source. You contact the source, you try to get some clarification, and if you can't, then you run with what you got. But too often these YouTubers get inside info from people who claim to be on the inside, but they may or may not be. And even if they are, they might just be making stuff up. So it's important that you clarify your stuff. And a lot of people get around this by saying like, "Oh, keep in mind, this is just a rumor." They put rumor in the headline. But just saying that it's a rumor isn't necessarily journalism. That's tabloid reporting, right? And people are just too lazy or don't know how to, get clarification on this stuff.
I don't think anybody's going to come back and clarify anything or validate anything. I think they're all sitting back and just laughing hardcore because at the end of the day, the math doesn't work out. When you go through every detail, the math doesn't add up, in my opinion.
Well, you also have to take into account the YouTube culture. Because YouTubers, they make their money based off of views, watch time, discoverability, and being viral, right? They got to do trending topics, and they got to do them multiple times a day, all this stuff. So someone like Grace Randolph, she can make the most stupid, ridiculous, easily disprovable video possible. But if the headline is clickbaity enough, if it's something like people are like, "Wait, what's this? The star of the Mandalorian's leaving? I want to check that out." And her video gets shared around. She makes something like, she gets like 1 million views or 2 million views or something like that on that stupid video. That's $2,000 in her pocket off of one video. So you have to keep in mind that, and then the YouTubers who pick up on that video and comment on it, whether it's to disprove it or to spread it around, they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to get the views. They're trying to ride the algorithm. They're trying to do all this stuff. So it doesn't matter to them if it's accurate or not. It just matters how many people they can get to see it.
Yeah.
So I've always been more the type of person that's like, I want actual news as opposed to, BS. And so like that's what drove me to make my video on the topic.
Can I ask you something about something that you said earlier about Kathleen Kennedy and her position and how she's kind of untouchable?
Yeah.
It seems to me that the Mandalorian really saved the day. Before it came out, there wasn't a lot of hope with what was coming down the pipes, whether it's the new trilogy that supposedly was kind of given to Rian Johnson. We knew that there would be Disney Plus shows coming out. We had no faith that those would be hits or how that would work at all. I mean, obviously Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are definitely the heroes behind that show. But if that didn't happen, if The Mandalorian or that first show got fumbled, the Solo, I don't know, everybody's got their opinion on Solo. I think in general it was viewed as, in terms of Star Wars movies, kind of a failure. If they had churned out 2 or 3 of those in a row and not had the success that Mandalorian had, there wouldn't be a situation where there could be repercussions, or it would really require Kathleen Kennedy to kind of step down herself.
So I need to kind of set a distinction here. Okay. There's how the normal public and the fan base looks at Hollywood.
Right.
Then there's how the people within Hollywood look at Hollywood. Okay. So we're all out here on the outside looking in, and we have our preconceived notions where, like, if you're bad at your job, you get fired.
Mm-hmm.
That's common sense. That's how it works in the real world, right? But when you work in Hollywood, and I experienced this, in my 10 years there, it's like living in a biodome, where, like, you are completely separated from the rest of the planet. It's its own little microcosm.
Right.
And just being in LA, like when I first moved to LA, I was like, time works differently here. It's so weird, like it's always sunny, like there's no seasons. It feels the same. It tends to, every day bleeds into the next. And you're just within, like, you're surrounded by the same people, because Hollywood's a very kind of closed industry, right? Now, keep in mind, Kathleen Kennedy was part of an untouchable cast of Hollywood elites, because she was with Spielberg and Lucas her entire career. Her husband, Frank Marshall, is a super producer, right? So she'd been in the industry since the early 80s, working with some of the top talent. And she knows the studio heads. She knows the CEOs of, like, Nike and, like Twitter and all that stuff. She was invited to all the right cocktail parties. Hollywood's a very relationship-based business. It's all about who you know and who you're friends with. And George Lucas himself handpicked her to run Lucasfilm when he retired, right? He wanted to step back, and she was his pick. So she's been anointed by King George, right? And then Disney comes in and they inherit her. But she's friends with all the people at Disney because she's been producing movies for 30, 40 years with them, right? Alan Horn, big proponent of Kathleen Kennedy. He's the one who runs Disney's film division. Bob Iger was a big proponent of Kathleen Kennedy. Like, he knew her very well. Every woman in Hollywood looks up to Kathleen Kennedy because she's one of the most powerful women in Hollywood. So when you're talking about firing Kathleen Kennedy, you're not just talking about firing a bad employee. You're talking about the PR of denigrating the most powerful woman in Hollywood, right? And Disney is such a PC company. They want to promote female empowerment and minority representation and all that stuff. So just based off of the optics of it alone, she would never be fired. Okay. But in addition to that, George Lucas is still friends with her. He's still in her corner. Spielberg's in her corner. A lot of powerful people in the business still in her corner. She's insulated. She's protected. She's as close to, like, a made man, to use a mafia term, as you can possibly get in Hollywood. Okay. So just based off of that alone, she's not going to get fired. Okay. Now, if Disney wanted to replace her, if they wanted to get rid of her, they would promote her. Okay. They would either move her laterally and give her, like, command of, like, a different division that has, like, equal power, but isn't in charge of Star Wars, or they'd make her the head of some big department that doesn't really have any real say in anything, but it's status increase, it's a pay increase, it's something like that. So she would fail upwards. Okay. Barring that, her contract, as a typical Disney executive contract, auto renews every 2 years. And the reason for the 2-year time frame is in case they want to renegotiate, or there are certain bonuses that, have to be paid out or something along those lines. So every 2 years, her contract is set to auto renew up until the point that she decides she doesn't want to do the job anymore. Like, if I think she's 70 now, if she gets to be 80 and she's like, I've had a good run, I'm going to go enjoy my retirement or what have you, then she'll step down. But at that point, she's going to have a handpicked successor to take over, just like George Lucas did, right?
So she's the Jay Leno of Disney, basically.
Pretty much. Because she's a woman, she's pretty untouchable right now. Now, I mentioned before, like, she's a very good logistical producer. And when it comes to producing, a lot of people don't understand what goes into that as a profession. But I was having a conversation with Andy before we went on the air, where I'm the producer of the Salty Nerd Podcast, saltynerdpodcast.com, if you guys want to check us out. And basically, I do all the legwork before the show, so that by the time the show, is set to record, everyone knows what we're doing, everyone's on the same page, it runs smoothly, and the host and the other people can just show up, have a good time, get the content made, but then I go back to work after the show's over. And so what Kathleen Kennedy did for Spielberg and Lucas, and because, like, if you look at some of the greatest movies of the 80s, have her name attached to it as producer. But she was more of a logistical producer. She was someone who would make sure that, like, the trucks ran on time, that the cinematographer had the right lenses at his disposal, that the crew was getting paid and that they were showing up and they were actually doing their jobs, that the Teamsters unions were placated and stuff like that. And, occasionally she'd give, like, some advice, some creative ideas to Spielberg or whoever, but her job was mostly in logistics. Now, when she became the head of Lucasfilm, she was now the head creative producer. And that's a very different job than being a logistical producer, okay? Because as a logistical producer, if Spielberg was like, I want 12 dinosaurs over here, Kathleen Kennedy's job was to get him those 12 dinosaurs in time for his shoot, right? But when it comes to Star Wars, she was put in the position of actually creating stuff, where she was the head shot caller. And she's not a good creative producer. Mm-hmm. And the way that she's operated since she took over Lucasfilm and Disney bought out Star Wars and everything, was that she kind of took what she used to do for Spielberg and did it with other directors, where she hires Rian Johnson and she's just like, Ryan, I'm here for you. Anything you need, I'll get you. Okay. Same thing with Lord and Miller. Same thing with J.J. Abrams. Like she's there to support them and their vision, because that's what she spent 40 years doing with Spielberg and Lucas. Now, the trouble is that these guys aren't on the scale of Spielberg and Lucas in terms of, like, their ability to do good creative work, right? So because she let them kind of go off and do their own thing, she lost control of them. Whereas you need a producer kind of like Kevin Feige at Marvel, who's very hands-on, and he's like, look, you can do stuff, but within these boundaries. Don't go outside these boundaries or I'll smack you down, okay? Kathleen Kennedy didn't do any of that stuff. And so what she had is she had the inmates running the asylum, where you had all these different Star Wars productions doing their own thing, and nobody was communicating. There was no overarching plan. There was no shot caller keeping everyone in check. And that's why we got such disasters like Rogue One, right? Rogue One was a good movie, but the story behind Rogue One is that Gareth Edwards was in over his head. They had to go back and reshoot like half the movie. They handed over control to Tony Gilroy, who was one of the writers. He came in, redid the entire last act of that movie, which was the best part of the movie, right? The whole battle over Scarif, I think it was, and he was the one who came in and did all that. There was a completely different ending to that movie originally, and so you had one troubled production after another. The reason that she liked Rian Johnson so much wasn't that he made a good movie. Is because he made a movie on budget and on time and didn't give her any headache. He was the only director she worked with that did that in Star Wars. Everyone else was a disaster. So, this idea that Kathleen Kennedy is ever going to get fired is just pure fiction. If you ever hear anyone tell you that, it's false. Now, when it comes to Solo, that was the one thing you could point at that Kathleen Kennedy truly screwed up at. Because even though we might not like The Last Jedi or like whatever, all of her movies in the Star Wars universe up to Solo had made money, right? They'd been successes. They were profitable. And Disney makes money off Star Wars more than just the movies, okay? The big thing is merchandising. They have their merchandising rights that they license out to all these different companies like toys, comic books, T-shirts, books. You name it. Okay, that's where the real money in these franchises comes from. It's the licensing deals. So as long as the licensing deals are pulling in money for Star Wars, you could have 20 flops in a row. But the minute it starts impacting the licensing fees, that's when the upper, management people wake up and like, okay, we got to make some changes here. But that didn't happen up until Solo. And Solo was a very odd situation. It's something that very rarely happens in Hollywood, but it does happen from time to time, where basically you had spent $150 million on a movie that was 70% done or 80% done. The directors get fired, and then they go back and they reshoot the whole movie, where you basically are spending $300 million on a movie that should have cost half that much. Yeah. And you're also spending twice as long to make that movie. And so what happened is, so you have this incredibly expensive movie, which should have cost half of what it made, right? Or should have cost half of what it took to make it. And then because they're trying to recoup that money as quickly as they can, Disney, instead of doing the traditional December release that Star Wars had kind of carved out ever since the reboot in 2015 with The Force Awakens, where it basically just owned December. It owned the Christmas season. They decide, we're going to push it out in the summer, in this crowded blockbuster summer, because it's Star Wars. People will show up for Star Wars. But what they didn't count on was how much people hated The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
And so by the time Solo came out 6 months later in the summer, number one, you had a crowded field of other movies that were competing for people's money. But number two, you also had a lot of bitter Star Wars fans who did not like what had happened in Episode 8. And so they decided to stay away from Solo, whether in protest or lack of interest, it doesn't really matter. They decided that they just didn't want to support the movie. And so you had the first legitimate box office bomb in the Star Wars franchise. Right. Now, keep in mind, I use the term bomb loosely because Solo did not lose money ultimately. Okay, it broke even, and in video, it's kind of found a new life and a new appreciation. So it's made a profit. It might not be a big profit, but it's made money. Okay, so in terms of flops, it's not a Heaven's Gate style disaster where it's going to sink Disney. It's just one of those things where it was a disappointment. And so that was really the one black mark on Kathleen Kennedy's record was Solo. Right. And that was something that I think woke her up to the idea that what she's been doing wasn't all that good. And so she kind of changed up things a little bit with The Rise of Skywalker. She gave JJ a little bit more room to do what he wanted. But keep in mind that during this point, Bob Iger was kind of repositioning Disney in terms of what their focus was going to be. And he really put the focus on the streaming service because that's the future of the Hollywood studios is direct-to-consumer exhibition. Yeah. They're cutting out the middleman. They're keeping all the money. So he was really planning on making Disney Plus the cornerstone of Disney going forward. And so while Rise of Skywalker was going on, he had made the decision to pull back on the movies. And a lot of people think, it's because Solo was a bomb. And that was part of it. But I think what he was really wanting to do was he was wanting to repurpose the content for Disney Plus because he knew that was going to be key to making that a profitable endeavor. And if you look at all the moves Disney has made with Disney Plus since then, it all kind of starts to make sense. Because if you look at all the Star Wars shows that are slated to come out, you've got the Cassian Andor show, right? You've got the Mandalorian. You've got the Obi-Wan TV show, okay? Now, back in 2014, 2013, I think Disney bought Star Wars in 2012. But leading up to the release of the new movies, there was all these plans in place where they were going to make a Boba Fett TV or a Boba Fett movie They were going to make a Rogue One movie. They were going to make an Obi-Wan movie. Okay. So if you look at all those things, those were just movie ideas that Lucasfilm had sitting on the shelf, and they were like, oh, well, we'll just turn them into TV shows. So instead of the Boba Fett movie, we get the Mandalorian. Instead of, like we got the Rogue One movie, but hey, now we're going to get a Cassian Andor movie.
Yeah.
The Obi-Wan movie never materialized, but now we're going to get an Obi-Wan TV show, So they just took everything that they were going to do as movies and turned them into a TV show. And that was kind of Bob Iger's big plan all along, I think. And so while episode 9 was rolling, Kathleen Kennedy was focusing on the TV end of things because that was the mandate that the CEO said. It's like, hey, we're focusing on Disney Plus now. Movies are going to be secondary.
So the reason why this topic is so relevant to comic books is we talk about Grace and some of the things that she's mentioned and said in some of the videos she's done, the influencing and the pull that they have. We see this all the time in comic books. This news that gets released, that filters down or, moves through 10, 20 different channels and gets replayed a lot, drastically affects the comic book secondary market big time. AKA Mr. Bolo, if you're still in the chat, Jack from Simpleman's Comics will tell you all day. He knows all about this regularly. Look at Star Wars number 42. Look at the Clone Wars number 1. Look at the way that those books have moved in the last 6 months. So we're going to segue a little bit into the comic book side of things here as well, because I know Tony's got some slides and some other things prepared. But this is when you take one little bit like Grace did and snowball it, you drastically affect the secondary market of the comic book industry or a collecting industry. I'm sure Pops. I'm sure there's some things that have happened with Pops that I'm not aware of and some other collecting aspects where it's like all of a sudden you go from having what was affordable to all of a sudden it becomes grails. It becomes unobtainable for some people with the pricing and what happens. Clone Wars is going to plummet after season 2 of Mando. Chris, I disagree with you, but I might agree with you later. We'll see what happens with Mandalorian season 2. Ahsoka Tano, like seriously, Matt, like 2 weeks ago, Ahsoka Tano, everything I saw on YouTube, everybody's gung-ho. She's going to show up. This week, and I'm watching some stuff, and people are like backpedaling a little bit, and people are like, I don't know. We'll see what happens. And I'm like, it's because nobody had any hard evidence, factual evidence to grab onto. It was just speculation running rampant at the beginning, and people are grabbing a hold of that, and I feel like people are starting to backpedal a little bit. It's Tony, you're nodding your head, man. So you're kind of feeling what I'm feeling. Matt, do you follow comic books at all?
A little bit. Like when I was in high school, I was a hardcore comic book collector. And like I would spend all my money on comic books, and I kind of got out of it around the time of Death of Superman. So that'll tell you how long ago it was. I still buy the trade paperbacks. You can see a lot of those behind me and stuff like that. So I do still enjoy reading comics, but I'm not like a collector anymore. Like I don't really seek out stuff. I'm more about the stories. I'm more about the writing and the art. And for a while, I actually studied to be a comic book artist, but I didn't like being alone, hunched over a desk, drawing stuff for hours on end. So instead, I sit alone, typing into a keyboard for hours on end, writing my books. Yeah, certain casting rumors and things like that's stuff that I can let fly because that's up in the air. That's stuff you can't really prove it, but you can't really disprove it. It's kind of fun and it doesn't really affect anything. If Ahsoka Tano doesn't show up in Mandalorian season 2, it's like, okay, well, maybe she'll be in season 3 or, who cares if she shows up or not, type thing. So it's not like something that would adversely impact the story that the show's trying to tell if she didn't show up. But something like spreading a rumor that a show's lost its main actor, especially if it's easily disprovable that can't happen, that's something completely different because that's intentional sabotage. That's trying to show something negative in the widest possible light. And also it undermines the credibility of the fan base when rumors like that get thrown around. Because if you really do want Lucasfilm to correct course, if you did not like The Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi, and you think that they need to have like a different way of doing things, the worst thing you can do is spread rumors like this, because the insulated Hollywood guys, when they hear that stuff, they're like, oh, these guys obviously don't know what they're talking about. We shouldn't listen to them anymore. And so the less credible your information is, the less credible of a critic you are, and the less people who are actually making the decisions are going to listen to you. And that's why it's important to only talk about credible stuff, or at least fun stuff, like the casting stuff. Like, no one in Hollywood cares about the casting rumors. But when it comes to something like the Pedro Pascal walking off, that's the type of thing that they can point to and say, hey, we shouldn't listen to these people because they believe stuff like this, and they're spreading this rumor around. So they're instantly not credible with us.
Yeah.
And,
so
and
Tony,
that hurts the entire community.
Yeah, Tony, what if anything have you seen over the last, I want to say, probably 6 to 8 weeks? Have you noticed a major difference in the books that we've been paying attention? And I know you've got a couple of things prepared.
We can hold off on that. Let's do
it. It's entirely up to you, man. I know there's about 4 books that I pay attention to, but you pay attention to about 10 times more than that. What have you seen? What have you noticed over the last 6 to 10 weeks based on some of these, the information or the influence that social media has had?
Yeah, I guess kind of branching off of what Matt was saying, I think we in the comic book community have we've got kind of a weird perspective on the whole thing. You know, we read the same stories about rumors and casting and movies that everybody else reads, but we try to pick apart what is important in that story that's going to affect the value of comics. If we get a glimpse of some character in some trailer and everybody's wondering if that is a $30 book now, should it be an $80 book? You know, we jump straight to that perspective. You know, the Suicide Squad trailer that came out, not trailer, little sneak peek. I mean, that it was almost nothing if you're just a fan of movies. It's, oh, look, there's so-and-so. Oh, look, there's so-and-so.
But any comics with Polka Dot Man in them are suddenly worth something.
Yeah. To the comic community, it was like 4 weeks of, should we be buying this one? No, this one's more important, and let's get, you know. So I think we do need to take that with a grain of salt. Like we do have an odd perspective on things, but it's just a different perspective of being a fan, because we're fans too. I do think the rumors do definitely affect comic values and what books people are looking for. Sometimes they persist. You know, there are rumors that are proven false, but those books still remain, you know, keep the value just for whatever reason. People just gravitate. Oh, it might be true. So that should be a $20 book instead of cover price.
Yep.
So I think, in my opinion, in the comic world, I think definitely eyes have really turned toward what is this next generation? Because for a long time it was looking like, okay, so we're getting a trilogy, you know, with the 7, 8, 9 trilogy that we got. Now there's going to be another trilogy of original stories, and are we going to have new characters? What's going to happen? But with the success of Mandalorian and with the real cult respect there is for some of the animated properties that have come out in the last 10 years, I think everybody is gravitating toward those characters. And if you look back at what was that game, Disney Infinity, the one where you can choose, they have Disney characters from all over, but the Star Wars characters, the Sabine Wren, the Ahsoka, I even forget the guy's name. This is how much of not a Star Wars junkie I am necessarily, but the guy looks like a monkey. He's purple. I forget his name. Anyways, somebody in chat, let me know who I'm talking about. But that's where everybody's focus is, and the fact that Dave Filoni had such a huge part in that. And now he and Jon Favreau are this kind of the vision, very stylistic and very story-driven vision of the future. I think people have really high hopes for for those characters, and then they're really searching what are those other characters that that should be that have had their day in the sun in some form, whether it's in a video game or some out of canon novels or whatever. Who it's all speculation who we want to see on screen. So it's unless we're the ones actually hiring the actors, nobody knows. We don't know.
Well, I mean, there's a whole universe of content that they could create and we can enjoy that if they just make it happen. I mean, the next 20 years could be just astronomically, no pun intended. I mean, it could be absolutely amazing for Star Wars and Star Wars content. Look at what happened with Ahsoka Tano. Like, Tony, me and you were talking almost 2 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, too many comic books, not enough money, already doing way too much. I really want to buy into that book.
Show your book, Andy. Show your book.
On the low end. The wife wanted an Ahsoka Tano in a 9.8. She wanted it and she got it. It's a book that I think 2 years ago we should have bought a copy or 2 copies. Don't laugh at me up there. It's one of those things where it's like you look at this steam train of what's happening with social media with everything that's going on. That book doubled in value in the last 6 months.
Oh, more than that,
if not more.
Yeah.
The print run wasn't tiny. 20. I'm just gonna say 26,000. I know it was a little bit less than that. Roughly, it was like 25,500 something or 26,500 something. Not tiny print run. But you look at a book from 2008, and Matt, 2008, Star Wars as a whole, people weren't like as diehard as they had been in the past or where we're at now. So during that time frame, 8, 9, 10, people weren't really like speccing or buying up comic books based on Star Wars content. I don't feel like that book had a lot of people believing in it to the point where they were stashing pristine copies. You look at that book in a 9.8 on the CGC census, there was 105 2 weeks ago. Now there's like 115 roughly. That is you're talking only 115 copies for all of the Star Wars universe of fans that love Ahsoka Tano. That's it right now. That book could go up more. Who knows? That's one of those things where you talked about, Tony, where the character could not even show up. They could never even see Ahsoka Tano. But I tell you what, that book's still going to be worth double what it was a year ago.
Do you guys think that the High Republic is going to have any appeal?
Ooh. Go ahead.
Like,
Tony.
I know that the High Republic, like, that's going to be their next comic book kind of phase until the next movies come out. But I haven't seen a whole lot of hype or interest about it. So I'm just wondering, do you guys think that comics based off of the High Republic are going to see any type of value? Value. I don't know. I think they'll see people following it and looking for that value, maybe chasing that value. Thereby, in chasing, they end up creating some value. But like, look at the IDW run of Clone Wars that's happening right now. I'm buying every copy that comes out because one, I want to read it as a fan. 2, I think it's a great series to give on to my son when he gets to that point of reading here soon, where he's reading those own comic books on his own. But there was a tidbit of speculation of this new Star Wars Clone Wars run having characters being introduced in the comic book that might eventually end up in the Disney Plus series or universe, if you will. It was a recession book, huh? I would also say that it was a post-prequels book, and everyone was still depressed about how the prequels turned out.
I would agree.
So.
Yeah, me and you were just talking about that the other day, Andy, how most of the Star Wars comics, especially after the prequel trilogy, like some people actually look back fondly on the prequel trilogy now because growing up that was their trilogy.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like how Dark Horse gained the comic property to begin with back in the 80s. Return of the Jedi was over. No one cared about Star Wars after Jedi because there really wasn't a lot of great content coming out from a Hollywood standpoint. So eventually Marvel canceled the thing, and then Dark Horse swooped up and got the property up until Disney bought it in 2010.
There's the generational aspect of collecting, to be honest.
For sure there is, yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, but I do find it odd how many people are so passionate about the prequels. Because I remember, so not to sound hoity-toity or anything, but I was at the Cannes Film Festival when Revenge of the Sith premiered. And, George Lucas was there, and he had rented out the Queen Mary, which is this big luxury liner that he was throwing parties at. And the entire cast of Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith was there. And it was going to be the big Cannes premiere in Europe when it showed. And I was so excited to see it. Like, there were just posters of Darth Vader everywhere at the festival. And being the Star Wars fan it was like, I liked the Phantom Menace. I thought the Attack of the Clones was, and so I was really hoping, I had been hearing a lot of rumors that Revenge of the Sith was going to be really good, and then I went and saw it in the Grand Theater with all these people, industry people, and everyone was the buzz was palpable. Everyone was there in their tuxedos and nightgowns and stuff like that, and we watched the movie, and as we're walking out, everyone's just like, wow, that wasn't very good, was it? And I just remember just being so disappointed in the quality of the prequels, and to hear people talk about how they love them more than the originals. I'm just like, what are you guys smoking? But it might be a generational thing because I grew up on the originals, and but I still don't think that any of the prequels hold a candle to something like Empire. So.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a generational thing because now there's a whole generation of people who have money who grew up on the Clone Wars.
I also think most people have very low standards when it comes to movies nowadays.
Ooh, I think I agree with you, Matt. Honestly,
yeah, I think there's a certain subsection of the population that is okay with bad, lazy storytelling, and they're more interested in the visuals or something like that. But if you look at the prequels, the dialogue, oh my God, that's some of the worst dialogue I've ever seen in a movie. The love story in Attack of the Clones was one of the worst love stories I've ever seen. It was so forced and awkward. It was like the love story of something that a 12-year-old virgin who's never talked to a girl would think a love story would be, So especially this is especially true of the sequel trilogy, right? Where it's some of the worst written movies I've ever seen, especially The Last Jedi. Whether or not you like Rian Johnson or his visual style withstanding, there's so many, a screenwriting professor would give that script an F if it was in film school, if Rian Johnson had turned that in. I honestly can't believe that movie got made as it was written, because the writing of it was just beyond bad. So the fact that there are people out there who think that that's their favorite Star Wars movie, I'm just how do you justify this terrible story and say that this is good? And so, but that might just be me. I have a very high standard for my storytelling. So
I'm gonna play devil's advocate on the people. I don't, not the whole prequel thing, but at the very least, Phantom Menace gets a lot of grief. I think Phantom Menace had some big things going for it. Darth Maul, one of the great villains of all of Star Wars right now, in many people's minds. The Qui-Gon, the casting, and Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson was awesome. One of the best lightsaber battles that I can remember. That ultimate battle with Darth Maul.
But there's a difference between having elements of a movie be good and then having a good movie. We at the Salty Nerd podcast this last May, we did May the Force be with you, and we did all the Star Wars movies. Every week was a different trilogy, and so we sat down and we watched all the Star Wars movies, and then did an episode about them. And when we rewatched the prequels, oh my God, there was just so much to unpack as to how bad those movies were. Now you can have there are elements of The Last Jedi that I think are actually pretty good elements, but when you look at it as a cohesive whole, holistically, it's terrible. And so I look at movies holistically. Same thing with TV shows. Like there's a TV show called Banshee starring Anthony Starr, who's now playing Homelander on The Boys. It's a terrible show, but in every episode it had one or two scenes which were mind-blowing. They were just like really creative, really good. The acting was fantastic, but the show itself sucked. So it's like, well, I could focus on these like elements that I like and find enjoyment in that. But overall, like, does the story stand the test of time? And with the prequels and with the sequel trilogy with Star Wars, I'd have to say no, they don't.
Yeah,
everything is built around that core, like episodes 4 through 6. If that wasn't the linchpin of the franchise upon which everything else was hanging, the whole thing would be a forgotten memory. Nobody would care about Star Wars. It's all, built up upon this foundation of the original trilogy, which was fantastic. It's something that affected the lives of hundreds of millions of people, but like you can't say that about the prequels or the sequels.
Yeah. Go ahead, Carson.
And I was gonna say I pretty much did the same experiment this year where I watched all 9 movies as they came out in a row, basically. Like I started with episode 4, worked my way to episode 9, basically. And I wanted to watch the original trilogy first because I knew, it was all gonna be downhill after that. I didn't want to just breeze through the prequel trilogy trying to get the stuff I actually wanted to see. So I ended up watching that first, had a great Star Wars time like we all would. And then, like, I noticed that same thing that Matt just mentioned when you turn on the prequel trilogy. Like, the dialogue just is not there. The story is lacking. It should have been probably one really good movie instead of 3 spread out movies because they told themselves they had to make a trilogy. Similar to what they did in the Disney era. They felt like they needed to make a trilogy, so let's make 3 movies, even though we only have, like, 2 stories to tell instead of 3. But, yeah, when I noticed, like, going from Return of the Jedi to episodes 1 and 2, like in the original trilogy, you had that great chemistry between the cast. You had some good dialogue. Even though the dialogue's not perfect, it's still Star Wars. You still call people nerf herders and that stuff. And you're just like, what in the world is that? But anyway, like when you go from episode 6 back to episode 1, you're just like, you can just tell the directing's off. The script is just, everyone was a yes man in Lucas's office. So when you actually get back to episode 7, it's almost a breath of fresh air for a little bit because at least the main actors in that, the chemistry they have is actually, I think, pretty good. And that's the biggest detriment to the new trilogy is they didn't have those actors spend enough time with each other within that story. You get to see them kind of interact with each other in the first one they were in, even though, like, Finn and 2 of the 3 characters don't even meet until the end of episode 8. So when you get to episode 9, I'm like, oh, great, they're interacting. They're on the same team finally. But there's like 20 storylines pushed into 2.5 hours. And it just makes for a bad movie.
Yeah, I get that. Tony? Yeah. I think we're going to have to consider taking time to revisit this topic in a week or two. And I think you and I should probably see if we can get Adam on. And me, you, and Adam actually do a breakdown of the books that we're paying close attention to. Because at the end of the day, it's not about whether it's going to, for me, it's not whether it's going to be a $5 book or a $40 book or a $50 book. It's when am I going to buy in? When is it going to be the cheapest? When can I continue to parlay or delay something while I'm already doing 50 other things? That's really why I pay close attention to that. Is not because I'm super worried about the value of the book. It's just if I'm going to build my collection, I would rather pay $600 for a book instead of $1,200 or $1,500 for a book, something like that, or $5 for a book instead of $50 for a book. Yeah. So I think we could dedicate a whole hour-long episode between me and Adam on just the specific books. But at least, like, look at the Boba Fett book. I mean, anybody that's been paying attention to comic books and Star Wars the last year or two, Star Wars 42 was a sleeping giant, in my opinion, for a long while, and then all of a sudden, last fall, maybe last winter, it really started to catch some heat, and so far that book's doubled in price in a 9.8. And we still don't have any factual confirmation. We have a grainy picture that got blown up that actually looks pretty good if it's not altered. by any means that looks like it's Boba Fett's armor. That's the best lead that we have at this point, and yet that book still more than doubled.
Yeah, I think sometimes they seem like different topics, but I do think the value of comics and in this comic speculation world where we're trying to figure out how much things are worth, we're looking at their scarcity, we're looking at first appearances and great covers. It really is like the futures market in stocks. It's the value of books is people voting on what they either love or what they want to see in other media. Mm-hmm. It could be just the love of the book, but if people love a certain character, even if there are no rumors of casting or no rumors of that turning into a movie or a Disney Plus show, if people in their own opinion
saga
Dr. Aphra, just some of that stuff, just you read it and it's just so cinematic as you're reading it. You're like, oh, this would be such an awesome movie. And if enough people think that same thing, then those values go up. More people are willing to spend money on it. So it's all interconnected. The rumors, the casting, the people who just want to collect for their personal collection, the people who collect to sell at a higher price, buy low, sell high. It's all fun. I mean, this is all. There's nothing here to be taken too seriously. But
it's like what Two Brothers Comics says: collect your way. Whether you're cover buying, whether you're buying for the story, or whether you're buying to flip a book, collect your way. It's going to be good. Brian and Jack at Simpleman's Comics: buy what you love and love what you buy. There's no wrong way to collecting comic books or art or pop culture items or taking it in. It's a passion. It's a hobby. You love it. There's not a wrong way to do it. I mean, people will go back and forth a little bit on some finer points about doing it a little bit better, a little bit more efficient. Efficient is a great term. Trying to be more efficient at some of this stuff. But we're going to start closing out the episode. It's we're coming up on an hour and a half. This has been a great topic, and Matt, we really appreciate the insight because at the end of the day, a bunch of us as comic book collectors are seeing some things unfold that we're like, come on, you're killing us. Like the social media is killing us from the comic book aspect because at the end of the day, it's just not factual things are being presented, and you're well aware of where I'm going with this. The not factual things are being being put up to the point where it's like, but at the end of them, they're like, hey, just kind of take it with a grain of salt. But the thing has already been said. And the 80% of the people watching have already watched the first minute of that video, and they're already running with it from that point on.
Some people don't even watch the video. They just read the title and they're like, oh, okay, I've gotten enough to know what it's about. I'm just going to run with it.
Oh, man. So we'll go around the horn here really quick, and we'll close out the episode. Matt, we'll start with you, our special guest tonight. Greatly appreciate it. Salty Nerd Podcast. All the links and all the information is down below for their IG, their Twitter, their Facebook, their YouTube channel. Everybody make sure that you go down and you sub them up, you support them, and check out their content because it is a blast. So, Matt, man, if you could close us out and tell everybody what you guys have coming up, what you got going on, what kind of little tidbits can you give us or sneak peeks? We'd appreciate it.
Sure thing. Well, first of all, Andy, thanks for having me on. It's a blast to talk about Star Wars and comic books. In fact, if anyone wants to go to kadishbooks.com, that'll take them to my Amazon page where you can find my novels. If you like Star Wars, my Earthman Jack series, it's kind of like I took every 80s movie that I ever loved, mushed it together, and said, what would happen if Steven Spielberg directed this? And that's my Earthman Jack series. I've toured around various different Comic-Cons promoting the book. I have a great little fan base for it. So if you guys want to check that out, it's got illustrations from Kim Jacinto, who's he did Marvel's Thunderbolts and Hawkeye and stuff like that. So he's a great comic book artist. He did full page illustrations for the book. But check out if you go to saltynerdpodcast.com, that'll take you either directly to our iTunes page, or if you're on an Android phone, they'll take you to Google Podcast or Spotify or something like that. And we put out 2 to 3 episodes a week. And every week, our main show is like a theme. So like this Tuesday, we're releasing Schwartz Timber, which is basically a Schwarzenegger movie. So we tackle 3 Schwarzenegger movies, talk about them. I'm kind of like the film geek, so I give like the behind the scenes factoids. I tell you a little bit about how the movie was made and the drama that happened on set and stuff like that. And the other guys tell you about the stories and, you know, whether or not it was any good and stuff like that. So it's a fun podcast if you like movies, if you're interested in that type of thing. Please check it out, subscribe to us, and, you know, just have some fun with us. We just started doing it full time in March. So we're relatively new. So if you like what you see, you can share it around, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you can find by going to saltynerdvideo.com. That'll take you right to our YouTube channel. And we're trying to put out daily content there. Sometimes I get backed up. I don't have time to make a video, but you can find all of our podcast episodes on there if you want to check it out on YouTube. So thanks for having me on, guys. I hope I didn't monopolize the conversation too much.
No,
I know I did a lot of talking.
You made some really great points, and it was the right thing to do to lay down that foundation that's needed to help explain some of those things. So I greatly appreciate your time, man. If you can hold on for just a couple more minutes, we'll talk just for a moment or two off air really quick. But Tony, man, where can people find you? I know where I can find you. That's the Simpleman's Comics Patreon group. So I know I can get a hold of you there. What do you have coming up? What do you have going on? Because I know you've got IG. I know you've got YouTube. I know you got a couple of things going on.
Yeah. And I just want to say, Matt, I'm glad you could stop by. It's so cool to get that kind of perspective. It's a lot of times those of us who are so hardcore comics, we all just kind of talk to each other and we get in our little bubble. So I really appreciate getting a little inside baseball on some of the rest of the something beyond our little walls here. But I'm trying to keep up with my the selling as much as I can. I got a bunch of stuff to unload and list. I've been trying to be more active on Instagram as I'm thinking of. I have a lot of my own little theories, and I'm happy to share them with people if you agree with them or not. Just books to look out for. So BlueGreen Artifacts on Instagram. I do throw YouTube videos up every once in a while. My production value is not nearly as nice as yours, and my set nearly isn't as nice as yours either. But sometimes we'll talk about what books we're buying, what books we're selling, and the reasons why, and give a little advice if we can. But no, I appreciate the invite, Andy. It's good to see you, and I'm sure we'll be chatting about something on Discord tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be next Thursday, but me, you, and Adam should get together and we should do a deep dive into the Star Wars books in general, just Star Wars books, because there's so much going on. And there's a lot that people don't know about that we can bring awareness to, of that they probably have sitting in their collection that they might want to throw in that Mylar goodness and make it all shiny. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So, hey, Carson, do your thing, man.
Oh, man. Well, first off, Andy, I just want to say this. Whenever you're ready to read Dark Empire 2, let me know. Whenever you talked about that stuff. But, man, I got a lot going on. First, I want to plug tomorrow's Comic Core show, Comic Core Roundtable, 10 p.m. Eastern every Friday. We're going to start a 32-character NCAA March Madness-style bracket with horror movie characters, and we're going to run the tournament all through October. So we're going to unleash the seedings tomorrow, which I don't know. This is what happens when I'm on vacation. I figure out random stupid stuff to do like this, and we're just going to roll with it. So it should be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that tomorrow here on the Comic Core. Then we'll be back Monday with Modern Men, and it's going to be a huge episode. Episode 50, Crisis on Infinite Earths. We're going to have, hopefully, the Great Legend show is going to join us there. He's bringing Howler Mouse with him, from what I've heard. So that was a great show. And then, of course, Drew Manchu will be there with Andy and I. So a huge Modern Men episode, our 50th anniversary episode, I guess. 50 episodes, Andy. How about that?
Dude, it's a year, man.
Yeah. And then, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish off, man.
Oh, and then I was going to say Tuesday's my Tuesday night live stream on the Seawater 19 channel. If you guys missed it, I also just started a contest for my subscribers on my channel. So go over there and check that out. And then lastly, October Read starts October 1st at midnight. I'm going to be reviewing and reading a horror-themed comic every single day for the month of October. So that should be fun. And that's all I got.
I'm looking forward to that. And the one thing I'm looking forward to more than that is Turtle Tuesdays.
That's right. Yeah, the following
So-
Tuesday, week from Tuesday, we'll be back
Yep.
for TMNT, the
Yep.
IDW run, reading volumes 4 and 5, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, dude, I greatly appreciate it. Matt, Tony, Carson, greatly appreciate your time. This has been a really fun episode. It's kind of one of those things where you can't fit Star Wars into this at all. So it's got to get broken off into segments. There's so much going on. We greatly appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for hanging out for Andy Given Thursdays. We really appreciate your support. I'm going to go peace out. I'm going to go peace out, or pinkies out. And I'm going to catch you all on the flip side for the next video. So everybody have a good night.
May
Thank
the
you.
Force be with you.